I'm Dan Morris, you're watching Bosun Dan Bushcraft, and today we're going to be making the Mojave scissor trap. At least I hope we are, because I've no idea if I've actually pronounced that word correctly. Mojave. It's a scissor trap though, and very much like other spring traps, it kills by strangulation, but it's got a little extra lethality. That's why it's a scissor trap. A lot of spring snares and things like that are not always specifically designed to kill the animal for you. Some of them just hold it in place until you get to it to dispatch, but this one is most definitely a killing trap. So firstly, to make this trap, you're going to want 3 good bendy sticks, because you're going to be making 3 hoops into the ground, staked into the ground. Now for this, I like to use holly, because holly's got a really good flexibility and it's everywhere. It's really easy to take a couple of branches off the holly. But particularly this time of year when everything's cold, and even though holly is evergreen, it's still kind of in sleep mode. You can't just bend it straight into your hoops. You're going to want to flex it up a little bit, get it used to bending. So give all your sticks a jolly good sort of warming up and get them flexible before you take it to that main bend. Otherwise, you will just snap the things. And once you've got it flexible enough and you've got it the sort of size you want, go ahead and put points on each end. So once you've got your 3 hoop sticks prepared and you've made them nice and flexible, go ahead and twist them, bend them into your loops, like so, and stake them into the ground, but make sure that you are completely underneath whatever stick you have chosen to become your actual spring, yeah? The power of your trap. Let's just make sure. Okay, so your first 2 need to be really quite close together. This ground is not proving to be the grippiest stuff, and as always when one is doing something such as this, there are rocks everywhere. We'll work around that. So making sure we're getting them just a little flex ready before they go in. That one's quite a bit larger. Let's try this one. Your first 2 is where the actual scissor action is going to be. And the back one is going to be responsible for your trigger. Find an area where there's no rock. Right, so that's the first 2 in. Not the bestest of ground conditions here. Flex up my 3rd. This one is going to be the anchor point for the trigger, or at least it will be. And get it in the ground. There we go. Okay. So we've got us 3 loops. Now we need to make the actual scissor part, the jaws of the trap, if you will. So what I'm going to do is take 2 sticks, and I'm just going to tie them together so that they hinge off each other. So all I'm going to do is on the first one, put a clovitch just above that knot there, set it so it's nice and secure, and to be honest, we should get away quite easily with just a pair of clove hitches on this without much bother whatsoever. So set another clovitch in here, says with a grin. The other half in yonder. just going to adjust that clovage a little bit, make it a little bit tighter. There we go. I can go tighter still, actually. You don't want too much slack at the bottom here. It is supposed to be a hinge, so it does need to have some movement and flexibility to it. There you go. Just like that. Yeah? Magic. In fact, I'm just going to tighten that up a little bit more. There we go. Lovely. So that is going to be the scissor part of this trap. So what I need to do now is tie. Firstly, what I want to do is put a knot to this and then literally put a little loop into it. Okay. Because this bit I don't want coming off, so I'm just going to do a couple of good old-fashioned overhands on that, because I won't be undoing this one. Nice and tight on that. And the thing is, like I've said before, this tarred bank line is beautiful stuff for not slipping against itself too easily. Just make sure that I've cut it with enough to make a loop. Okay, I can't see. I have the sun right in my eyes behind me over there. And all I'm going to do is just put a very simple loop here. Now, depending on the size of the animal that you're wanting to trap, you want to try and keep this loop quite small so that the scissors can close together quite nice and tightly, like so. From there, what I'm going to do, this is the line that's going to go to my spring. So what I'm going to do is put it through that loop and come through and then tie it on to the top of the other scissor jaw there. Pull a bit through so I've got plenty to knot with. Excellent. So you can already kind of see where we're going with this. If something gets caught in there, that closes up. So now I need to trap my spring branch. I'm just going to lob a coil of rope over it. There we go. Now, pull that into view. You can see what I've actually done is trim the end off this. That'll make it a little more fast acting as a spring. It'll remove some of the natural air resistance of having the stick on the end of it and just make it a little quicker acting, because like I said, the idea of this trap is that it kills really quite quickly, so you want it to be a fast acting spring and basically take whatever you're catching by surprise. There we go. I've trapped my spring, so now I know I've just cut the top of my head off a little bit with the camera there. Now it's time to make the actual trigger system. And you're going to want a stick that looks something like that, with a little angle piece on it there to form a bait stick. Put a point on that. Obviously I'm not actually going to be putting any bait on it today because we're not actually trapping anything, as most of these traps would really be illegal to use unless you were actually stuck in a survival situation and starving to death. We're not. We're only doing this today for demonstration. I'm not going to leave it set at the end of it. Now once I've got that, what I want to do is take a smaller, that's a lighter, that's no use whatsoever, where have I put me? There he is. Take a little stick like that, small fat log sort of thing there, and I'm going to cut this in half. Literally just split it down the middle there. He says, as he realises he doesn't have anything to whack the blade with. So, there we go. And I want both pieces of this. what I'm going to do is I'm just going to notch the back end there, and that's going to give my cord somewhere to grip to make sure it doesn't come off. And you'll see exactly why in just a moment. See, just putting a little notch both sides of it. Now then, so what I want to do now is take my spring cord, pull it down so as it's got a lot of spring force in it. I'll just check that that will indeed fit. Yeah. So what I'm going to do is again just clove hitch it to the trigger piece. One thing you've probably picked up on by now watching my videos is that I really do love a good clove hitch. Such a brilliant knot, easy to use, easy to undo. But let it actually slide round so that it's on the top, or as close to the top as you can get it. There we go. Now from there, don't really need this excess cord. So again, I am probably not going to be particularly well in the shot right now, but it is more important that you see the mechanism than seeing my face. So what I want to do now, get my little trigger piece and make a measurement as to how much of this from the actual scissor jaws that I need to then tie it on to the back of the trigger. So a bit more cord than I need there. Save that for later. So make sure all of this is nice and good and tight so that you know you've got plenty of spring tension in your actual spring stick. Because like I say, you do want quite a bit of pressure for this. And then I'm just going to tie that on to the line that goes to the spring. Very, very fiddly business, this. Magic. Trim that off. Keep it neat. Right then. So earlier, when we split the log to make the actual trigger pin, I kept that. And the reason I kept that is because what I'm going to do with that is place it on the ground underneath where the actual trigger anchor point's going to go. Because if you don't do that, what will happen is once your trap's been set for an hour or so, the very bottom of your actual trigger pin will most likely dig into the ground by quite a bit. And what will happen then is it'll stick in and it'll be a lot harder for it to be pulled loose when said animal comes along and starts pulling at it. And you don't want that, because obviously that then is going to make for a not a very sensitive trap at all. Right then, so to actually set it, the scissor bit goes in the middle like that. And what I'm going to do, I just want this string out of the way for the moment. I'll worry about that in just a minute. This might want trimming down a little bit. I'm going to pop that right under the back there. I'm going to have to try and do this left-handed so you can see. I'm going to pop that right under the back there. And then with keeping that string nice and clearly out of the way, balance that on my piece of wood. It's a bit fiddly to balance. Yep. So that's it all set. Really, you want your bait stick a little bit further back, so this last ring could go a little further back to make sure that the head is in there. We'll experiment with that, but this is obviously just for demonstration. Now that trigger looks quite clunky. It's actually a lot more sensitive than it looks. It is a lot more fiddly as well than it looks, but there are a lot of other alternative ways of doing your trigger. I can think of many, many more. It is a little fiddly until you get the hang of it. I have to admit that it's not the easiest one to set up like that. But you can see the action that's going to happen. Something's going to come in, interfere with that, knock it out from underneath that pin, which lets the spring go up, which will then let these jaws clamp shut. So there you have it all set up, and if you imagine some bait on there, animal comes in, messing about with it, and it is then trapped and squished between those two sticks. So we've refined this up a little bit now. You can see what I've done is I've took the anchor hoop a little further back so that the bait stick itself is a tickle further back. Now, depending on the size of the creature that you're wanting to catch, I would probably take that even further back to make sure that its head or chest is in between the scissor jaws, because what happens is as the animal goes in and interferes with that, lets the trigger off, you can see that the scissor jaws are going to crush it. And this is how it is a trap that is lethal more quickly. Basically, it kills a lot quicker than just a normal snare, because it's putting a lot of extra pressure on whatever animal interferes with it or gets involved with it, basically. But if you were using this in a situation for catching anything, you would really want to block up around the back with either sticks staked in the ground or a lot of litter, spiky plants, to make it so that the only way they can access it is actually through this front here, because obviously animals aren't dumb, and if they were to go in this side or the other side or from the back and interfere with the bait stick, all that would really happen is that they would set the trap off and frighten themselves. You know, they would just give themselves a bit of a shock and a fright, but you're not going to catch them. So really, like most traps, you need to make the entrance point to the trap itself the path of least resistance, so that the animal actually goes that way in. I'm not going to do that today because I'm only demonstrating this. I don't really want to be faffing about doing all that, because I'm not going to leave this trap set up for any purpose. But that really is all there is to it. So animal goes in, messes with the bait stick, and then you've got it trapped with its neck or chest being crushed by the scissor jaws, and that will dispatch it really rather quickly. So the advantage of the scissor trap over other lethal traps like your deadfalls and things like that is your prey is going to be largely undamaged. The idea is you're going to catch it either around the throat or around the chest, and you're going to put it under that much pressure that quickly that it will die practically almost instantaneously. Whereas with the deadfall, yeah, you're still going to kill it instantly, but now your dinner's flat, and when you've broke every bone in it, it's not quite as easy to process or easy to work with, really. So this one is better on that, because what would happen is your prey would be nice and dead, but it's still going to be in pretty good shape. You're not going to have a completely flat animal that you've then got to really, you know, do the icky stuff with. Because I've always wondered about that as well. Some bit of sun glare there. With a deadfall trap, the chances are, if it's something like a squirrel or a rabbit, the chances are, if you've gone and dropped a big if you've gone and dropped a big log on it, or a rock on it, I like that. It's a lock. It's a combination of log and rock. But if you've dropped a big log or a rock on a squirrel or a rabbit and it's squished it flat, the chances are that you're going to rupture the internal organs or the gut, and that's going to foul the meat. So, you know, unless you're really, really awesome at making deadfalls and you can guarantee you're only going to catch it by the head or chest, there is that chance that you are in fact then just going to spoil the meat that you've collected. So I'm a tasty little rabbit. Ooh, what's this? Lettuce. Ah! So that really is all there is to it, to the Mojave scissor trap. Really quite effective. It's a little fiddlier, I'd say, than some other traps, to be honest, but ultimately worth it and incredibly reusable. Once you've built it, you're going to be using it quite a bit over and over again, and you could literally set that up in front of rabbit holes or animal tracks, and that would be the reason why they have no way through. Because the problem with a lot of these traps is when they rely on bait, what you're baiting rabbits with, if you're stuck out there in the wild, what bait are you going to get certain animals to actually go for? It's far easier to bait predatory animals because, you know, meat, but when you're looking at, you know, herbivorous animals, it's a little bit harder to bait them. So sometimes putting a trap as an obstacle on one of their trails and making it so knocking the bait stick out without bait on it, just the trigger stick, for them to pass through, knocking that out becomes an easier alternative than fighting with whatever obstacles you've put there, because obviously they're not going to think it's a trap, they're just going to think it's a stick, they're going to push through it and grab. So sometimes putting them actually where you know the animals are wandering about would be the better thing to do. But that's about all we need to say on this scissor trap. So as always, guys, get out there, get bushcrafting, be safe and enjoy yourselves.